Welcome everyone. Go with the flow number 11. I am so excited. Hi Michael, how are you doing?
I'm doing very well today. How about yourself, Flo?
I'm doing amazing. Look, the sun is shining. I couldn't ask for a better day to have you live stream with us. So for our audience, Michael is joining us here from Hillsborough, New Jersey. And Michael, why don't you introduce yourself to our viewers?
So my name is Michael Robert Muscatello. I'm an older brother of 4. I'm a partner to a lovely significant other, Jessica. I've lived in Hillsborough for the past year or so, and I'm a jack of many trades. There's a lot of different things and a lot of different areas in which I seek to provide service to the world. By day, I'm a business development executive for a global training company. By night and all the time in between, I practice a very symbolic art process and provide coaching to various individuals seeking to accomplish various different goals. It's rather open-ended in terms of the service that I provide in that domain. I participate in jujitsu, wrestling, striking, as many combat sports as I can. That's an absolute love of mine. And in my spare time, try to keep order around the house. It's good for my good for my ability to, I don't know, I guess exist on the whole, not do any one particular thing. And, meditate, practice yoga, try to get that in as much as possible. And that's a quick synopsis of me and some of the things that I do.
I love it. Jack of all trades. And it's, the yoga, the meditation, and the jiu-jitsu, and the personal growth that has really, put us together on this journey. And I'm so grateful, Michael, to have you here. The title of this interview is Life Can Be Good If You Can Remove the If. And this came about from a conversation that we had a couple of months ago. And so let's explain to the audience, what does that mean to you?
Yes. So quick background on how it came about. I've had a lot of interesting synchronicities surrounding some of the self-development workshops that I've participated in. And one of them was Shift, that was led by Chris Hawker of Next Level. And I took a journal that I had been using for years prior that I had put down for a number of months. And the very last entry that I had written in the journal was, life can be good if you can remove the if. And so I actually used that for the beginnings of what I would call a symbol map. It's somewhere surrounding graphic notation meets intuition, and a very symbolic narrative, or many symbolic narratives rather. And so I started this drawing with, life can be good if you can remove the if. So the mission was to remove the if. And what the essence of that is to me is essentially, it's about judgment. It's about peeling back all of the pre-qualifiers that we place on life in order for it to be good, right? So life can be good if. Mm-hmm. And many people can finish that sentence very quickly, right? So how can we remove the if so that life can be good? As being realistic as often as possible. Life can get tough. We all know that.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing is removing the judgments from yourself, from when you're having an interaction with someone or any relationships that you have, removing the obstacles, whether it is, that little voice that we have inside us that tend to beat us up and makes us, having not only difficult conversations with ourselves, but with other people. So removing all those layers of limited beliefs that are holding us back truly from who we are at the deepest of our soul, of our human being.
Yes. Yeah, you hit right to the core of it. It's impossible to avoid having some sort of reality filter. You have to have some sort of structure from which you interact and exist and builds your actions and interactions with the world. But to the extent that we can remove judgment, or at least judgment that puts an if in the way of life being good, is to the extent that we're free, right? It's not for the sake of do what you're told, shut up and just be happy. That's not a tenable solution in my opinion. It has to do with allowing more of ourselves to be free, so that we can continue to create what we want to see that we might not have. But don't let that be the thing that makes life not good. And it's funny, I just came across, not just came across, but I just read a little bit of Viktor Frankl recently, talking about synchronicity. I know that that's one of the topics that you wanted to get into. I had read some of his stuff and listened to a few videos on him. Today, I was in a bookshop with my father, and he decided to buy me a book without telling me, and it turned out to be a Viktor Frankl book. So if that wasn't the universe giving me a little pat on the back. But Viktor Frankl, you know, he talked about the highest moral, and moral isn't a word that I would personally use very often, but the highest moral standard is to position oneself to life, or orient oneself to life in such a way that it is good, and to take responsibility for the things that might stand in the way. So anyway.
And what book was that?
The Man's Search for Meaning. I believe I got the title right. Man's Search for Meaning.
I got this book for Christmas from one of my very good friends, and I am, you know, totally in the same agreement with you that this book is fantastic. How he takes his circumstance of pain, of suffering, of challenges, of obstacles, of discrimination, and he actually looks at himself as from the observer, and how he can take his situation and make the best out of it.
Yes.
To fulfill a purpose that he's craving deep inside, and he has been able to find that.
Yeah, and that's all that we can do, right? You know, I mean, life will impose certain circumstances on us. People call it fate, right? We can't control fate, but we can control is our orientation to fate as it unfolds. You know, and another person that was in a very similar situation to Viktor Frankl, Alexander Solzhenitsyn, he wrote a book called The Gulag Archipelago. And he spent years and years in the Gulag, you know, being tortured, being put to work alongside of other people. And he saw a number of people that were spiteful, that kind of cursed life, cursed God, cursed fate, the sky, whatever people look up to and say, oh my, you know, so he looked at that, but he also saw the people that did the best inside of these work camps, inside of the Gulag. And those were the people that had some sort of a system by which they've decided life is ultimately good. How might I be responsible for this situation, and how can I make it better? And, you know, you can spend, I mean, we could spend years and years discussing and working through and thinking about whether or not life is good, or life is justified, or just. And at the end of the day, that might be a useful conversation sometimes, to exercise that domain of thought that you might have, to feel heard and to feel connected with other people. But it's no place from which to make life better, unless you're looking at how it could be better and what you could do to make it that way. And that can be a tough burden to bear for a lot of people, is, you know, I'm responsible for everything that is wrong in my life. And it's not that anybody is the cause necessarily, but we bear the responsibility. But that responsibility provides opportunity, right? It's not, you must do this. It's not, you must do this. It's, you have the opportunity. You actually can do something to make things better. And even if that's a matter of your perception and your orientation to life, how you meet life, you know, if it's with spite, or mistrust, or if it's with trust, and you behave as if it is good. It might not be, but you behave as if it is good, and that can create, well, at the very least, less suffering for you. And
I agree that, you know, taking responsibility of the situation is very important, not just for the other person or the other situation, but also for your own sake, and for your own growth. What I will add to what you just said is remove the morality, because it's not about right and wrong. It's about seeing the fact. This is what happened. There's a story around it. Remove the story and look at what actually took place. And from there, you know, what are the possibilities that are opening up?
Yeah. And it's not about blame. It's you don't find fault for the sake of placing fault. You find, where is the fault in what happened or what transpired, so that I can fix it and make it better, right? It's not about, you don't own up for the sake of beating yourself up, right? Negative motivation. I mean, some people seem to be able to use it, but I find it to be extremely ineffective in almost every scenario where beating yourself up takes away from the energy that you might have to fix a problem, you know? And the other bright side is if it is you that has at least part of responsibility for the problem, that means that you can do something about it. That responsibility gives you a certain level of control in an existence, an experiential soup that is life that, you know, can oftentimes feel like you're along for the ride.
So if someone, you know, thinks about that concept, life can be good if you remove the if, and they're not even sure where to start. And I know we're gonna get into more depth of synchronicities and mindset and the creative process. But if you can, you know, just start it opening that box of freeing yourself, where can someone start?
Where can someone start removing the if? Well, you can look at, so the if is more of a judgment kind of statement. Where I was going to say is you can look at the things that you find to be important in life, whether they be values, ways of doing things that are going on that you're participating in. You can create more of them so that more of your life and more of what you see and more of what permeates reality is something that you consider to be good. But removing the if, we can't always do something about the situation. Oftentimes that if is an object that is outside of ourselves that we can't have control of. So it begins with really a willingness to change one's own perspective and one's own tendency to react to the stimulus that comes across our path in life. You know, I would say that the first and most useful tool, it's a concept called Shenpa, but I've heard it in many other self-development circles. It essentially describes the energy that arises within us as a result of the things that we experience. So the first place that one can start, based on what's been the most useful and the most simple for me, has been being able to recognize Shenpa. And Shenpa is an objective term. It's not the good energy or the bad energy. It is the energy. You know, someone comes up to you and says, hey, or your best friend gives you a call. Hey, would you like to come with me to the beach? And what happens is we process that stimulus first in the body, and then it rises up into our minds, converts our reaction into a thought, and that thought comes out of our mouth, right? So what happens is, would you like to go to the beach? You feel a sense of elation in the body. The experience begins in the body first. And yes comes out of your mouth, right? And in the same way that a friend might call and say, hey, I have to cancel on my plans for the beach with you, you feel it in the body first, and oh, okay. You know, you feel let down, you might tense up, you might be frustrated because your friend's always canceling on you. Who knows? But
and I think that's also one of the reasons why, for example, someone like Tony Robbins will say, you know, if something's not working in your life and you don't know what's missing, first start by getting into your body, exercise, dance, you know, move, do whatever it takes to get into your body first, and then work through those roadblocks.
Yes. Yes, I really do believe that everything is grounded in the body. You know, there's research that was done on individuals who were completely blind. And what they did was they monitored their heart rate, their skin temperature, and they flashed images of angry faces in front of these people that were completely blind. And interestingly enough, when the angry faces would come on the screen, those people would get hot. Their heart rate would increase. So there's a sensory capacity that we have that goes beyond pure sight, where the body is experiencing something first and it's producing somatic results. So, you know, it's not so simple to boil anybody's problem or if down to a matter of just pay attention to the body, right? But the first place to start is to start small and to practice being able to become mindful of your reactions to things, the energy that arises in you. And that works for good and bad. Sometimes our reactions to good things aren't necessarily helpful to us. You know, some people get into an overwhelming sense of well-being and they spend money like crazy. And there's a difference between living abundance and, you know, making decisions that are going to hurt your future self because you're not in your right mind, so to speak. So becoming aware of how your body reacts to negative and positive stimulus. And from there, you'll begin to, with that small practice, you'll begin to notice when in immediate circumstances, this isn't necessarily the key to fixing all the big problems in life. And remember, it's not necessarily about changing the big things that are your ifs. It's about being able to change your reactions to things. So starting at a small level, you know, somebody at work says something to you, or you find yourself frustrated because the same conversation's being had over and over and over again. You want to remain in the zone where you can create, or at least have the chance to create forward progress as you define it. And if you fall into fight mode as a result of tensing up and as a result of reacting and not being aware of your energy, you're not going to have a generative conversation. And the only person that you're hurting, well, the first person that you're hurting is yourself. So anyway,
or maybe not hurting, but limiting.
Limiting. I like that. Yeah, I like that a little bit better. I like that.
And so one of the things that comes to mind is to start that process. Meditation is a perfect way, right? Where you get to sit, where you get to breathe with yourself, where you get to become more aware and observe what's taking place, whether it's that euphoria state or it's that upset state.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. Yeah, mindfulness is at the core of being able to recognize the energy that arises within you as a result of you interacting with the world. You know, the one stick doesn't stand on its own. Your experience of life is essentially energy, and there's you, and then the other stick that props up the experience point is life as it unfolds. And mindfulness and meditation and many different types and forms, any type of mindfulness, any type of paying conscious attention to something is extremely useful. But there's many different particular and specific practices outside of just focus on your breath or focus on your body, because I know some people have a tough time doing that, and especially making a practice out of that. There's all kinds of techniques that you can use to start conditioning yourself in a useful sense, in a conscious way, right? Developing conscious conditioning as opposed to being unconsciously conditioned by the environment to notice that energy.
And what are maybe one tool that comes to mind when you think about that?
Well, first and foremost, the mindfulness practice, you know, I love starting almost every meditation with a big, deep exhale, just releasing, and then spending a minute or two scanning your body, right? Seeing if you can bring your awareness to your toes, seeing if you can bring your awareness to your feet, and then up through your shins, up through your thighs, up into your abdomen, your chest, out through your arms, all the way up to your head. And it's not that you're looking for anything. It's just, can you sense that portion of your body? And it's surprising for many people how disconnected we are from our physical bodies and our physical sensations. So the first practice is inside of just a standard meditation where you're trying to sit and observe what's going on, is a body scan. But taking that one step further, and this was actually something, so this was a technique I believe we did when I learned about the concept of Shenpa from somebody that led meditation meetings, former president of IPEC Coaching Academy. His name's Luke Iorio, and he was like, I'm lucky enough to know him through some social circles, and he led some meditation circles, and one of the concepts that he taught me about was Shenpa. And so we did some visualization, recognized the energy that we felt in our body, and I don't mean just energy in an amorphous sense. I mean skin prickling, skin getting hot, mouth tightening, you know. You begin to get a sense of these things going on as certain thoughts cross through your mind. So that was one place. The second place that I received this, and kind of the beginning of my journey into, I don't even know how to define what the last 8 months have been, but it was a next level. It was a guest trainer. Her name was Mary Jo Laurie. I had the blessing of being able to speak with her actually just yesterday. I finally got to share with her how much of an impact she had on my life. But what we did is we visualized, and this can be intense for some people. So maybe start small with little things that trigger you, either positively or negatively. But we sat down, we got into a mindful space, we quieted the mind, and then we visualized our absolute biggest, wildest dream coming to fruition. And then immediately after we spent however many minutes really making that real, paid attention to the shift in how our bodies felt. And for some people, you know, they felt butterflies. For some people, they felt warm. For some people, they felt, I can't remember. What's that? Goosebumps. And then the other thing that we did that I found to be very useful was envisioning the worst fear. And some people's skin prickled, some people got hot, their chests got tight, their tongue pressed up against the roof of their mouths, their brows furrowed. One of the things that I noticed that I would do, and it really, you'd be surprised at how little you know about your physical reactions to the stimulus that you come across. I found out that I snarl. I snarl when I think of things that activate my disgust mechanism. I snarl. So anyway, recognizing those things and then utilizing, and there's plenty of different types of breath techniques to bring yourself back.
And then you're like,
down.
oh, my body's telling me something. Maybe there's something for me to look at.
Right. And the first place to start accepting that energy and removing the if that the brain would typically jump in with, well, this is the problem. Now the problem is the reaction. And now what we're going to do is we're going to start the process of acceptance by first focusing on a breath or two. And if you have time to yourself, you can focus on the exhale, really get that depressive breath state that calms you down going. But when you're out in the world, part of the reason that a meditation practice is useful is you can access that same state, that same benefit, that same function from one conscious breath, from just paying attention to one breath. And that's really all that it takes.
And it's so beautiful because, and also a reminder for our viewers, this is a journey, right? It's not because you will feel something in your body that you're like, oh, I feel this in my body, it means this. Now, sometimes you may not get the answer of what's really underneath that feeling, and you may need to sit with that emotions or feeling for a couple of days, or maybe journal about it to really dig deeper of what is that trying to teach me.
Yes.
Right?
Yes, having patience. You know, our body and whatever it is connected to, the subconscious as a very broad category, meaning not within your conscious experience, right? Because that snarl was technically subconscious that was going on until I brought consciousness to it and I noticed it. But, you know, I like to think of the subconscious sometimes as a child, and a child that has lost trust for its parent, right? Or an employee that has lost trust for its boss. And the thing is that you're not going to be able to fix it because, oh, well, I recognize that something's wrong. What is that wrong thing? And I want the answer right now, right? When you're working with someone in psychotherapy, in coaching, if you're mentoring someone, if you're working with a child, especially a child that's been traumatized or hurt in the past, parents that didn't protect them, what ultimately, well, so I would provide an example. So anyway, the point is that that child, that inner child, has lost trust for us, the parent role that we kind of play with our subconscious over time, because we don't have the patience to listen. And so it requires a willingness to be open to whatever comes up, not telling the child when it has, well, the child says, oh, well, this is what's bothering me. And many parent-child dynamics, not with the inner self, but in real life, I see a parent telling the child what it is that they're feeling and why, in an attempt to solve the problem, right? They're doing it out of love, but what's ultimately happening is that the child isn't able to be heard. It doesn't have its own voice, and then it just begins to quiet down and quiet down and quiet down, and it takes relationship building to get to what is going on. But more important than that, right? And I wanted to speak to what you said about the patience that you need to have, and visualizing, you know, what might be going on inside as you need to gain the child's trust back in order to get what's going on inside. More importantly, what I think is, not more importantly, but what's more useful in the immediate or in everyday life is the ability to realize that something is going on, not necessarily looking for an answer, right? Because many times when we look for an answer, we're looking for a justification for how we feel, which is in and of itself a judgment. We're placing an if. Okay, I notice that I'm upset. Why? And if I don't get an answer as to why, then I'll be frustrated because I'm confused about why I'm upset. And you want to circumvent that. You don't want to use the thinking brain that's trying to figure out in order to find that peace that allows you to move forward in the best manner possible. You want to access that place, and you might get clarity the next day, the next week, the next month, the next year. But the goal is to be able to utilize that mindfulness as a tool to flow, to be more fluid in your day-to-day interactions.
100%. And let me come back to the synchronicities. You know, what have you experienced over the last, 8 to 12 months in your life as a result of, removing the if, or as a result of your personal growth and everything that has been taking place in your life?
Goodness. Well, There's so many different little things that have just kind of blown my mind. The biggest thing that I've taken away from, is that how you phrase the question? What have they done for me, or what have I experienced?
What synchronicities have you noticed? Have you become aware? And you're like, wow, this is a sign, or, you know, or it's showing you that you are on the right path when you are not sure, or synchronicity of alignment.
So I can say what the experience of synchronicity has done for me is it's almost like a confirmation that there is a sense of connectedness, and not necessarily reason, but it's not all random, this life. It brings me a sense of peace and connectedness to the idea that there is something going on behind the scenes with not necessarily conscious intelligent design, but we're not just a tiny little dust mote floating on an insignificant planet in a timeless, you know, expanse, and that makes us meaningless. Synchronicity has provided me with a sense of personal meaning. Now, in terms of synchronicities that I've experienced, you know, almost a little bit hesitant to share some of them, just because it seems like, oh, well, you know what I always imagine is that somebody will say that, you're looking for this, or you're looking for that, or you're buying into this, or you're buying into that. And the reality of the situation is, the biggest synchronicities that have blown my mind and kept me small in terms of being a child and being humble as I continue to exist is with the drawings. You know, there's a number of drawings that I've done for people, and this was something that took me probably 6 months to get used to or even comfortable with. And you can tell that I'm squirming a little bit sharing this now, but there's been things that I've drawn that I could not have possibly known about a person, or that would be associated with a person, including myself, including, geez Louise. Well, you know, instead of jumping right into some of the deepest ones, you know, some of the lighter things that I've seen in terms of synchronicities are self-organizing drawings that result in performing graphic notation without placing any judgments over the creative process. And where a lot of this started for me was, I took some graphic notes just to try and the purpose was just to try and remember the training better, right? Get my money's worth for the 3-hour navigating anxiety seminar that Mary Jo provided. And I started drawing. And when I finally looked up from the page after 3 hours, and of course, putting it down to do the meditations, I noticed that it organized itself. It seemed to have a narrative structure that came out of me, that was a result of the interaction with the material in front of me, that had an intelligent design to it. So intelligent design coming of not trying to consciously control a process has been one of the biggest reconfirmations that continues to happen. And every single time, man, I sit down, and the more that it's happened, the harder it is to sit down and draw. Because I'm like, all right, how do I do this right so that the magic keeps happening? Because if the magic doesn't keep happening, then I'm a charlatan and I'm a fool, and I'm grasping for things that aren't there. And the thing is if I have the willingness to sit down and create, it happens. Things that I draw seem to somehow happen afterwards in my life. I see things that I draw in my waking life that just. One example, I did a symbol map for a woman, and I drew an owl, and I didn't intend to draw the owl. I looked at the symbol map afterwards. I turned it upside down, as I often do, because part of the symbol map process and the interpretation of what's there is looking at the forms themselves, not at the intention behind what I was trying to draw. So I got into the habit of turning my drawings upside down because I would see shapes that were directly applicable to whatever the topic was. And turning this upside down, it was a big, giant, unmistakable owl's face.
Wow.
In the next week, and I have never seen an owl in person in my life, I saw 2 giant barn owls, and it just absolutely blew me away. And, you know, I hesitate to share anecdotal information like that, because if I really was going to dig into the list of synchronicities that I've experienced, it would be long, and there'd be a lot of qualifying and a lot of sharing of my logical deductive reasoning that I did to come to the conclusion that, man, there's no way that this could have just happened. You know, so anyway, that's, I guess.
So what I'm hearing is that you have somehow been able to connect with like a higher energy and allow that energy to channel through your body, to channel through your soul, and you have put that into the drawing.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And it comes as a result of being able to let go, removing the if, not paying attention to the end result, following whims. That's a technique that is tough sometimes, because I think our desires that we give into that may keep us down in one way or the other can often disguise themselves as our whims. So it can be a tenuous process of going with a whim as opposed to going with a habitual action that doesn't actually serve us. But the process of following whims, whether it be writing, drawing, speaking, things that come to mind, things that you think of when somebody is speaking that you can't explain why it's connected, but it is, being willing to trust that and follow that whim crazy things happen. It's like if you're willing to give up the driver's seat and just participate in existence in whatever domain that it's in, there's this power or organizational force that seems to flow through your willingness to be open to existence itself. That's the best way that I can sum that up without spending 2 hours talking to you about that one specific topic.
Yeah. And I guess to get to that place, you really have to start with you, right? And that's where you have gone through so many personal development, training, experiential learning, or reading and connecting with people, and really embodying all that information, absorbing it, so that you can find yourself free to be, free to act, and truly let go, so that you can just create that magic.
Yeah, and one thing that I want to note that's important, because I find that a lot of my philosophy is based around the individual having everything that they need to get whatever it is that they want from within themselves. And I just wanted to say, in my personal experience and my personal development, the workshops have just been icing on the cake, or maybe the icing in between layers. Maybe I'll give them a little bit more credit than that. But the biggest expansions of my ability to live freely, to put it one way, have come as a result of consulting myself, and not consulting myself in a way where I sat down and thought about a problem, but asking a genuine question and having the patience to shut up and wait. Because I still have a difficult time with this. It's not like it's so easy, but asking myself questions. Number one, I'm not entirely sure why we're averse to it. Maybe people are worried that they'll feel a little bit crazy asking themselves a question, or maybe they're afraid that they won't get an answer, or maybe they're afraid that they will get an answer and they won't like the answer that they get. But in terms of treating oneself as having an inner child that requires the earning of trust, we must also address ourselves earnestly. We must ask ourselves the questions that we seek to understand the answers to, and have the patience to discover that answer, because we can. We very much can. And it's blown my mind time after time just how much I've been able to gain as a result of asking genuine questions as if I was speaking to somebody else, and just letting it sit, just letting it go.
Yeah. So powerful. I love what you're saying. And also, I think for me, a practice like that would be questioning myself. Am I asking the right question? What is the question I need to ask? So I think there's also that aspect of, like you said, coming back to the trust, and actually, yes, just trust that's the right question. And the more you ask yourself questions, the more you become, you coach yourself. It's self-coaching, right? You become you should be your best cheerleader. And so from that place, you should be able to ask yourself questions. And as you practice it, then the questions will become more clear and more clearer.
Exactly. You can't expect yourself to have the right question from the start, because if you knew what the right question to ask was, then you would know what the answer was, that you would know the person that you're asking the question well. The whole idea is that, we start from a place, many times, many individuals start from a place of not having a relationship with their inner self, with the part of themselves that they're not necessarily in conscious control of. So if you lived with somebody, whether it be a partner or a roommate or a child, and they wouldn't talk to you, and you didn't talk to them very often, they got used to you never asking a question and never talking to them. Well, don't you think that the reaction would be pretty great if you just asked a question, any question, to get the conversation started? When you sit down with somebody for psychotherapy or psychoanalysis, you don't ask the right question to start off. You can't ask the question that's going to fix the problem right away. It requires active listening, right? Which you have to stop thinking to a certain extent to actively listen. Being willing to continue asking questions, having unconditional positive regard for the answers that you get. One of the things that blows my mind is the answers that I get back sometimes are way quicker than I expect. And they almost seem to be, it's not that I don't like the answer, but it doesn't seem applicable to the situation. But if I'm willing to give that thought more room to expand and grow, I find that, well, treating oneself as if, you know, you're worth asking questions to, and treating oneself as if you're having a conversation with another person, right? You're not just going to ask the question that gets you the answer that you want right away. I mean, even in sales coaching, you know, you have to sit down with somebody and you have to start with a series of questions surrounding why they might have done something, what their strategy is, what they're thinking, before you really get to those questions that create those aha moments, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Wow. And tell us, so what was the story about how Alchemy was born, your website, your business, with your life coaching business, and then moving into the symbol mapping? Where did that all start, or how did that all start?
So a couple of years ago, I was a corporate sales trainer. And I trained a team of inside salespeople, about 30 people, and I would train the new hires for the most part. And we'd spend 8 weeks together in a classroom, and I would essentially be their school teacher. I mean, 8 to 5 o'clock, I was the guy that was curating their day and their experience. So in the mornings, what I would do is I would create icebreakers to keep things fresh. And we're not going to sit there and talk about the same, not the same material, but material all day long. I mean, nobody has the attention span to spend time on one particular topic. So I started these icebreakers, and they started turning into philosophical sessions after a while, which was really cool. But there was one icebreaker that I developed that was essentially this. I called it the symbolism game. Draw 4 symbols on a sheet of paper that represent you in some way, shape, or form. Okay. You don't want to be too forward about it. Right? You don't want to write words necessarily. You can use words as a part of the symbol, but the idea is that we're using an image to describe ourselves in some way. And here's the part that makes the game fun. Don't tell anybody whose yours is. We're going to post all of these up on the board and see if we can guess whose is whose based on the symbols drawn. You know, and that was the real pull for everyone. You know, when I introduced the exercise, look, it's a room full of adults. They're there for sales training. As much as they don't want to be bored to death, they also don't want to do a goofy exercise, you know, for no reason. So the whole rub that made it a game with stakes was, hey, we're going to guess whose is whose. But you can't use any original symbols. You can't just use a cross or just use a heart or a yin yang. You can use those as a part of your symbol, but you can't use those symbols themselves. So there's a certain level of interaction and creation that the individuals had to participate in. So we put them up all on the board, and I just thought this was fun because I've always been interested in symbols and the way that we are conditioned by them and create them, and that condition us that we create more. And that's a depthy topic, right, in and of itself. But to try to stay on track, I was just interested. I was curious. I didn't realize the power of symbols from a personal interaction with them in real time until it came time to start sharing whose was whose and what did the symbols mean to you. And in the midst of a corporate sales training class, I had a room full of people, and I was 21, 22 at the time. I was very young getting this role. I was, you know, very nervous to try and do a good job and play the part. And this whole room of people started crying, standing up, making valorous exclamations of what's important to them and what values they live by and what they want to see in the world. And, you know, my brother overdosed and my mother left me, and people were sharing things that I could not believe they were sharing. They did not know each other for very long. They were crying, consoling one another. And, well, to finish off, then after an intense sharing session, they would look up at me and be like, okay, you're the facilitator for this, so what do you have to say? They look at me like I'm supposed to say something. Oh my God. And of course, on one hand, like, this is the kind of experience that I always sought to have in my friendships and with people that I met. Like, I'd love to provide somebody a therapeutic experience, not therapeutic in a clinical sense, but therapeutic in the sense of it being therapeutic, right? Friendships, good friendships are therapeutic. Many things can be therapeutic. I love that idea, but I was so nervous. And these people were just like looking at me like, okay, now comment on what I just said. That is one of the deepest, most personal pains that I have. And boy, that was I didn't realize what it was setting me up for.
Mm-hmm.
So I ran that game with every class and had incredible results with every single class that I did this with. Every single time, not all of them were as intense as that first class, but every single time it cut directly into the heart of the individual and what was important to them. It was incredible the way it did it.
It's so beautiful because what I'm hearing is that it's opening vulnerability. And when you show vulnerability to people around you, you get to connect with stranger at such a deeper level than if you were knowing them for years and you wouldn't even open that part of you to them, right?
Yep. And I always told everyone, because, a lot of people, oh, I can't draw. Good. You know what? The worse that you can draw, the better. I don't want you, it can be simple. The importance is the meaning that you imbue in it and the intention that you draw it with, So it really was a great exercise. Sorry, I got a little bit lost thinking about it, to be honest with you, because there's a few moments.
Let me bring you back. What does the name of your website represents to you?
Alchemy. So the idea of the process of alchemy is that you're combining elements to create gold, right? To generate gold. And looking at that from a symbolic lens, well, what might gold represent? As opposed to thinking about this as some, story from a witches and wizards book, or as opposed to thinking about it as some hidden occult practice, well, I think Isaac Newton was an alchemist. There's all sorts of interesting scientists that participated in alchemy, but let's look at it from a symbolic lens. What is the idea behind trying to combine elements to generate gold? And the idea is that the elements, right, they're not just phosphorus and nitrogen. The elements of one's existence and one's life are all of the experiences that are generated, all of the thoughts that you have, all of the things that happen to you, that you do, that you hear, that you see, that you feel, right? So there's an infinite expanse of elements. How do we combine these elements in such a way as to produce gold? Produce gold in what sense? Like money and riches? Well, maybe for some people, but the idea of gold is a little bit more, it's a little bit broader scale than that. It's the idea of that which retains its value over time, right? What can we create that is precious, that creates value over time? And I would say that is...
And that shines, that radiates,
that
right?
shines, that radiates. Well, let me ask you a question. What would you consider to be gold? If you were making a symbolic extraction from the idea of gold, what would you consider to be gold?
For me, gold would be a voice, a powerful voice of being able to share, to anybody you meet, something that is so true and authentic. For me, that's gold.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Beautiful. So for me personally, what I, and it changes for me from time to time, but knowledge and wisdom, specifically of the self, focusing on the self, giving the self, almost a right to be here, and not only a right to be here, but a right to be worked with to the greatest extent possible. So anyway, alchemy, I think we got the concept of combining elements to create gold, and whatever gold means to a person, right? But the idea of alchemy, ALCHEME, is that the individual has everything within themselves already to be able to perform that process. We have all of the precursor elements. And one of the biggest precursor elements, and this ties into being able to take the judgment lens off of the things that happen to us and see how we can transmute difficult experiences. One of the precursor elements to true gold is pain. It really is pain. We don't learn but by the hard way for the most part. I think it was Carl Jung that said, be careful of wisdom unearned. Be wary of wisdom unearned. And that doesn't mean that we have to put ourselves through the hard process to learn anything, but it means that the things that we learn the most deeply and wind up being the most valuable to us oftentimes come as a result of pain and hardship. And so I'm getting a little bit off track. Alchemy, it's the combination of one's life experiences to create that which they consider to be gold. And to refine and refine and refine that gold, right? Continue to refine that, whatever that is to you, because our starting definition is never our ending definition when we undertake a personal journey of what it is that we're seeking.
And this is basically your life coaching business that stand on the principles of working or transforming the self, right? And it's like you describe on your website, it is a process that is of you, by you, and for you.
Correct. And the coaching platform, my philosophy of coaching, as I understand it, is you are there to share what you hear an individual saying. You are there to point out contradictions that you might see in what they're saying. You're there to seek to understand them the best as possible and make them feel understood by repeating back to them what you're hearing. And then to ask empowering, open-ended questions and to have no intentions whatsoever. You are facilitating a space. You are a tool that person can use. But it's not about giving advice. It's of the individual, by the individual, and for the individual. They decide what the goal for the conversation is. Now, if they ask you to help keep them on track, that's one thing. You can help bring them back to a point of focus. But the idea is that you're creating a space for them to uncover what it is that they're looking to uncover. And for some people, the definition of gold is defining gold. It's like, well, I don't know what I want. Can you help me figure out what I want? It's like, yeah, let's talk about it. I'll ask you some questions that can get you thinking. And it's very similar to, what's the gold that we're trying to create here? And I would like to think that's insight, feeling understood, feeling reflected in other people that people are listening to online. But what you're doing in the way that you're asking questions, you're providing a platform and a process to focus on a specific topic. It's very similar to the coaching experience.
And also give or trigger some thoughts, some thought process for the audience, right?
Right.
Open up new horizon, and also perhaps for them to discover blind spots, which is, to me, one of the biggest aha moment that I had in my coaching experience, being coached by coaches, and realizing, oh my God, there was a forest behind me, and all I'm looking is at the tree in front of me, and I'm banging my head on it.
Yes. Yeah. And blind spots are, the thing that I love about blind spots is that it almost makes it necessary for us to be interacting with other people or interacting with life itself in order for us to learn more about those blind spots. And on one hand, some people might think, oh, well, that's not of me or by me or for me. But the thing is you have to be open enough to receive what might be in that blind spot and have that blinder taken off. And then you also get to take credit for the fact that you make a change based on uncovering that blind spot. The process is of you, by you, and for you. But part of the definition of being a human involves the absolutely inseparable nature of you and I and me and the couch and the sky and this bug and a person in Africa that I don't know. It's all completely predicated upon itself. And there's a beautiful sense of connection that I think comes from the coaching process, the workshops. I love to ask myself questions, but I can ask myself too many questions sometimes. I love to sit down and have somebody coach me, in essence, tell me what they're hearing and ask me better questions based on what they're hearing. Or I love to go and participate in the world, get some feedback, get some data, and then consider what the data might be telling me and move forward. And it's beautiful because it's not all on me. Yeah. It's on me to interact. I have to make the first step, but it's not all on me to make the rest happen. I just have to be willing.
And what I love about what you just described is, this is for me, like also the world of jiu-jitsu. When you are on the mat, it's you against you. Like truly your opponent is you. And by grappling with other people, and whether, you are tapping someone or you get tapped, you get to discover so much about your own blind spots by that interaction with somebody else. Right. And
yes.
And that's why I love that art so much, because it not only helps develop, your technical skills, your mind, but also like discover truly, what are my limitations as my ego, who, may want to fight and has an end goal, which I don't know, because sometimes it's unconscious. But then once you find yourself into that grappling fight, you're like, oh, maybe I need to let go a little bit.
Yes. And, I love that you brought up jiu-jitsu, because a metaphor just came to mind, right? And the idea is that in order for you to find your blind spots, it's important to have a good partner. to have a good wrestling partner, to have a good grappling partner. If you have somebody that comes in and just beats the crap out of you, I mean, they're way better than you, you're just starting out, or maybe you're not starting out, because the levels to jiu-jitsu are just unbelievable. It's a game with unbelievable depth, but somebody just purely beats you up, you can't do anything. It's really tough to learn because you don't even have the opportunity to really interact. If somebody just lays there and lets you beat them up, you're not learning much in that situation either. There's a perfect zone of tolerance when it comes to having a good partner that you can learn from. And I think jiu-jitsu is a great metaphor for life and the way that we treat each other, not just inside of coaching sessions, but the way that we interact with each other on a day-to-day basis, you know, being too passive, being too aggressive, or that sweet spot where we're willing to speak up on what we see in our friends or our loved ones. But not in a way that's condemning or is aggressive or seeking to, you know, call them out for something for the sake of placing blame. And, you know, jiu-jitsu requires a partner. Just like for your growth, you require partners in the form of any experience. I mean, day-to-day life, trying something new, speaking to somebody, it's all a partnership if you can allow it to be.
Yeah. Team and collaboration is key, and sometimes we don't realize it until we actually get to play that game. Yeah. So beautiful. So moving on into mental blocks, right? How one of the reason why I started jiu-jitsu, why I got into meditation, why I got into coaching and yoga is to work on, you know, the mental aspects of our being. And so how do you navigate mental blocks, and what advice do you have for our viewers?
Well, I'll speak from my own personal mental blocks, and they get rather complicated. I overthink quite a bit, and what I find is that the best way to overcome mental blocks is to create. You know, it's so often that we're seeking perfection when we don't know what perfection is, but it prevents us from doing anything because we're seeking to do it perfect, right? And that, in some ways, you might say, well, it's because I don't want to waste my time, or I want to make sure that I do it right, or I don't want to waste somebody else's time. And those seem like altruistic motivations. But if at the end of the day, you don't create action, then they're excuses. They're rackets, to steal a little terminology from Next Level. They are programs that you run. They are patterns that you play out that may have some benefits, right? You don't have to see if you're going to fail, or you don't have to worry about whether you're wasting time or not, although it's arguable that if you're not doing anything, then you might be wasting time. They may have some benefits, but the costs outweigh those benefits. It is better to do and create and get feedback from that doing and creating. And that can be in any domain. It doesn't mean art. It could be in the way that you treat people, right? You have to be willing to try something new. You have to be willing to take a step out in order to get that play back. You know, you have to initiate.
And ask yourself that question: what is the price that I am paying?
Yes.
Yeah,
it's huge. And a lot of times it can be hard to. Now, part of the trick that I use with mental blocks is to not think about it too much. Because sometimes what I'll do is I'll ask myself, what is the cost? And then I'll get into an argument, and I'll be with myself, and I'll be having a philosophical debate, when in reality, I keep having these philosophical debates internally that stop me from doing. And so, you know, the idea is have you felt the willingness or the confidence to do something before? Or have you felt a sense of well-being before? And if that is the case, and if that has taken place before, and then you have every right to inhabit that space right now. You have every right to skip past the inner conversations. Am I doing this right? Should I go about this? How should I go about this? What justification do I have for feeling good about life right now? Which is a big mental block. You know, I think many of us feel much more existential angst and dread than we are willing to admit to. And that's part of the reason why we shut down, is because we're not being open and honest with ourselves about the existential angst that we're feeling inside. But one of the best ways that I've found to get out of that place is to not think my way through it, not use a trick of think about it this way or conceptualize it that way, but just say to myself, hey, have you felt good before? Have you felt in a place where being seems justified before? Yes? Okay. skip all of the useless nonsense that you're about to put yourself through to try and feel better, and just be there. And I don't mean to make it sound so simple. It's not like it's always that easy to employ, but that's one trick that I've found that does seem to work rather often.
Yeah.
So
or just journal that. Ask yourself that question, right? And see it in writing in front of you, because sometimes seeing it and reading it, something clicks in the mind and we can't explain it unless we actually do that.
Yeah, journaling is huge. Journaling is really useful. A lot of people will say, you know, I'm not a writer. I don't write. And it's not about writing for the sake of writing. It's about pinning down those swirling thoughts that you have consistently, or maybe getting out some of the thoughts that you keep you might keep the volume down on those thoughts, or you might keep the other thoughts volume up in order to avoid hearing certain things that are taking place inside. And journaling, and especially to the extent that you can just let go and just scribble, you know, you can burn it after. You don't have to read it a bunch of times if you don't want to. You know, there's a million reasons why people are hesitant to journal. And I think a lot of them circulate around being afraid to find what they might find in journaling. But if you're willing to go there, and the most important step is the willingness to initiate, the courage to initiate. You know, nature rewards courage. Nature absolutely rewards courage. There seems to be a certain rule set that you can't utilize and count on and use to completely gamify life. You can't cheat the game by recognizing that nature, you know, it doesn't mean that you go jump off a roof and test God, so to speak. You know, oh, I'll be fine. I'm doing something courageous. No, but implementing courage, doing something like journaling, asking a genuine question, remaining quiet, being willing to sit down and try to meditate for 10 minutes. That kind of courage is greatly rewarded, in addition to many other types of courage, you know, starting a business, being willing to say that thing to your friend that you hear them saying, and you're afraid of how they'll react, but you know that it's important for you to tell them what you're seeing and what you're hearing. There's
coming from a loving place. Yeah, that's so beautiful. And so why is change mandatory, Michael?
I'm sorry, what was that?
Why is change mandatory?
Well, there's a lot of different ways that I'd like to answer the question, but the first thing that came to mind is the idea that you can't stand still in nature, right? Entropy is consistently happening. In order for us to even stand still, we must be moving forward.
Yeah.
Because things are breaking down and falling apart all around us. And I mean that in a very practical sense. Like, technically speaking, the banister over there is breaking down, albeit very slowly. And it's something that I won't have to worry about for a while. But staying in the same place is falling behind. And that doesn't mean that you are not satisfied with who you are, where you are right now, and seek to find that place of solace that you are everything that you need to be already. But it means that in order to survive, even, but then to furthermore thrive, we have to be able to adapt and change. You know, nature provides room. Evolution takes place as a result of having what is called adaptive stability, right? Where there's a small amount of randomness. It doesn't mean that you constantly need to be disheveling your whole life, changing the way that you do everything all the time, creating tons of uncertainty and discomfort for yourself that's not productive, right? Adaptive stability is this concept of nature for allowing for small pockets of randomness to rise up. You know what? Instead of being all technical, an anthill. All of the anthill functions as a result of the ants being able to follow the rules, stay in line, smell the pheromones, do what everybody else is doing. But then there's those one or two ants that venture off, and they're able to find a new food source when the old food source runs out. That ultimately saves the colony. So being willing to allow for randomness, adaptation, change, it's absolutely essential. Change is mandatory to survive, period. To stay above water, it is mandatory. And if you want more than staying above water, well, maybe it's not necessarily just creating more change. Maybe it's smarter change. Maybe there's different types of change that can take place. But I mean, change is mandatory because that's just part of the rule set that is seemingly built into the way that existence takes place.
This reminds me of Jonathan Livingstone, the story of the seagull who flies, and everybody else around that seagull says, no, what are you doing, you know? And then that seagull is outcast, and eventually the seagull come back and teach everybody else to fly higher, right?
Yes.
And so that comes back to change is mandatory, because by being in that constant place where you get out of your comfort, you are actually growing, and then you're surprising yourself of how much potential you actually have by getting into that uncomfortable place.
Yes. Oh my good. I'm so happy that you brought that book up. It's sitting right over there. I just read it recently. My uncle recommended it to me. I cried so many times reading that book. And building off of what you said, I don't know. I know that there's a couple editions that have been released. Did you read the edition where time goes by, he teaches the other goals, but then the cycle starts to come back on itself, where he and the birds that could fly as fantastic as he could, that he taught to fly that way, they start dying off. And then the tribe of birds, they deify them. They develop rituals to show respect to the birds that taught them to fly high, but they ultimately never participating in that flying and pushing themselves. They fall victim to dogmatism, and they fall victim to believing that the power comes from the ritual and the routine, as opposed to the actual action of embodying what their heroes did. You know, these birds used to be real birds, but so much time had passed that the new birds that came along just built statues of them on the beach, and they'd drop pebbles and they would chant things to the effect of, "We'll never be as great as you, oh mighty bird Jonathan." And then they go back to their mundane lives, and, you know, they experience pain, and nothing ever changes and nothing ever happens, because they look at their heroes as something to deify and be submitted to or submissive to, as opposed to something to seek to embody in their own lives. So that's something, man, I could talk about that forever. I'm so glad that you brought that book up. It is one of the best books I've ever read. It's super light reading. The level of metaphor in the narrative is, I can't believe how much depth is captured by such a simple and lighthearted story about birds. It's fantastic.
Birds. Yeah, amazing. Wow. So tell me, Michael, what do you have, like an affirmation that you live by, or if not, what do you try to live by?
Well, and I say this at the risk of being misinterpreted. I seek to be Christ-like. Right. And the way that I would define Christ, I wouldn't say that I have an affirmation that I say. I've had a difficult time making affirmations work for me personally. And that's okay, because different things work for different people.
Yeah.
But the idea of embodying the greatest hero that I know of, and hero based on what? Well, that's something that we could spend a long time talking about. But the essence that I see in Christ is the ethic of acceptance, right? Christ represents ultimate love. What is ultimate love? Well, how do you define love? I'm not sure. The closest that I can get is acceptance of everything in every moment as often as possible, and behaving in such a way that assumes life is good. Jesus assumes that God is good. You know, part of the way that I interpret the biblical stories is that God the Father is not necessarily a gaseous vertebrate in the sky who's punishing people, but it's representative of life and the feedback that you get from life based on the actions that you take. And if you continuously act in such a way that life is good, then things won't turn out necessarily perfect, but it's your best bet. And I'm stealing that from a favorite individual of mine, thinker, Jordan Peterson, right? It's your best bet. It doesn't guarantee anything. You might wind up on a cross. You might wind up being crucified in front of your friends, family, you know, being fed vinegar through a sponge when you're thirsty and having your clothes gambled on. And you might get crucified worse than anybody else ever before. But at no point does that justify the spiteful reaction, the reaction that seeks to take vengeance and control of things. It's the reaction that is acceptance and the bearing of one's cross that allows you to not only transcend the thing that might have been the death of you, but also provide power and energy for other individuals to transcend whatever it is. I'm speaking in very metaphorical terms. In very metaphorical terms here. But my affirmation, well, it's the idea of what I try to live by is embodying Christ, embodying infinite acceptance to the greatest extent that I can stretch my human spirit to do. And Jonathan Siegel is a perfect segue into that, because, you know, a lot of people, they look at Jesus as somebody to self-flagellate over. and they look at what happened in the story of Adam and Eve, original sin, as the reason why we are damned, as opposed to looking at the story. Before Jesus left in the biblical story, he said, like, go and preach the good word, go and be little Christs. And what it means to be a Christian to me, although I don't really identify with many definitions or labels, but what that means to me, that word, is the idea of embodying the ethic of Christ, not because I show up somewhere every Sunday, or because I look a certain way, dress a certain way, do a certain set of things, don't do a certain set of things. The definition is embodying acceptance and behaving in such a way that life could be good. And it's not always easy to remove the if from the start, right? But it takes that courageous step. Nature rewards courage. If you begin to behave in such a way that life is good, then you start being able to remove the if. If you act as if it could be good, then it starts being good, and you have to get past the if in order to do that. And then that if starts to fall away. So this is something that I really, I should have some conversations and record them and share them with the world in terms of the significance of the biblical stories to me, because I can assure you that they are not very much aligned with anybody else that you come across that would even talk about Christ as a character. But that is what I try to live by. And like in Jonathan Siegel, I'm not trying to sit there and just place pebbles on the ground. It doesn't mean that I don't have reverence for characters and figures, whether they were real or not, characters that are alive in my life that I seek to embody the ethic of. But that's not the only thing that I'm doing. I'm not just practicing reverence. I'm not just practicing ritual. I am seeking to embody. I'm seeking to fly and challenge myself and fly at higher speeds than the seagull's body is necessarily built for. And I hope that anybody that's listening is intrigued about this story, because it's so worth reading. It's
so beautiful. And what I'm hearing too is taking a leap of faith and being okay with that, right? Because you come from a place of nothing, where you feel so free to do, and you're just so open to gold, the opportunities and possibilities.
Yes. And coming back to Viktor Frankl, in terms of a leap of faith, like, the universe is constantly testing our resolve. Life, existence, experience, it's constantly testing our resolve. And the thing is that, you almost have to be the initiator. You have to be the person that starts the game. You have to take that courageous step, and then life starts to unfold. And synchronicity starts to happen. It doesn't mean that you see the same number everywhere necessarily, or that, the same book that you read last week comes up in a conversation, or two books that you read in the past span of time come up in a conversation, but things seem to happen. It's like, whoa, there's changes that are taking place and unfolding. And then I noticed that there seems to be this pattern where things seem to move in your favor and conspire in your favor, and then you get tested again, and you have to take another leap of faith, and then you get tested again. It's constantly testing your resolve. And Viktor Frankl says that maintaining that resolve is the highest moral order that man can inhabit. And I'm sorry, it looked like you had something to.
Yeah, and I love what you're saying, because we are bringing it back to our conversation at the very beginning, where we talk about action. It starts by action, by taking one step after the other. So you dream, you declare, and you take the action.
Yes, exactly. It's necessary. You got to be. I'll leave it at that. It's absolutely necessary. And then there's a blessing period, and then there's a period of shaking your resolve and creating unsurety. And the more that you can continue to get into the habit of just creating and doing and taking action, the easier it is when the challenges get bigger, because they will get bigger. And I don't think that it's useful to try and seek a life that avoids pain, right? You want to be the kind of person that is able to stand up in the face of the pain that is pretty much guaranteed. And I don't mean to make that sound so pessimistic, but if there's anything that's guaranteed in this life, it's not that you'll have people that'll love you. It's not that you'll have people that'll respect you. It's not that you will have good things happen. The only thing that's guaranteed is that there's going to be some pain involved. Everything is constantly breaking down. Like, every breath that we take. But you
get to choose how to react to that pain.
Right. And you get to choose whether you seek to avoid pain continually by not taking action, or whether you seek to get better at managing pain, so that when a great pain that you can avoid comes across your life, you're able to transmute it in a way that well, at least makes it better than if you couldn't.
Yeah, break through and grow from that.
Yes.
So beautiful. Michael, what is one question that I didn't ask that you wish I had asked?
Geez. I've loved every drop of what we've talked about, and I also love the fact that you are able to set the tone for the topics, because geez. One question. Man, there's a lot of things that I'd love to expand on. One question that I wish that you had asked is, you know, what I think that you asked it, and I maybe, what has been the most pivotal experience, or what has been the most impactful experience that's taken place over the course of your life, or maybe you asked something along the lines when you were asking about synchronicity. You know, what has been the most life-changing synchronicity? One question. You've done a wonderful job of getting me talking, although it's not that hard to do. I love the space that you've curated and facilitated, and I have to give you kudos. You do a wonderful job with every guest. So I wasn't really thinking about what you could have asked. Goodness, I'd rather just give you credit than, because if I'm being honest and genuine, really I don't know. I don't
Awesome.
know.
That's
Sorry.
perfect. That's perfect. I love it. Thank you. I acknowledge and take that lovingly. Thank you so much. So let's get on to the final section of our live stream, rapid fire questions, the favorite of our audience. And so I'm going to give you a set of questions, and then really what comes to mind, without overthinking, without going into as much depth as we did from at the beginning of the session until now. And the first one is, what is your favorite quote?
Favorite quote. My favorite quote right now is that success is not final and failure is not fatal. And I can't give that to somebody. Somebody emailed it to me. I can't remember who it was, but success is not final and failure is not fatal.
I love it. Success is not final and failure is not fatal.
Yes.
Beautiful. Back to the 4 symbols. What are your 4 symbols, and what do they represent to you, and what do they mean?
So I've created many sets of 4 symbols and more symbols over time, because that in and of itself is a practice of self-discovery that I find to be unbelievably useful. Maybe that is something that I wish that you had asked is how does, you know, harnessing imagistic thinking and the spoken word combine to create even more insight for the self? And I won't expand because I know these are rapid fire. My 4 symbols right now, I actually drew 4 symbols for this particular, for this podcast. So hold on. So right now, there's a picture of a mountain.
Yeah.
And there's a little plateau, and there's a switchback. And at the point on the plateau, there's some dots around it. This is kind of you are here. And where I have felt is, as I've felt at times that I'm at the top of the mountain. But what I've learned is that the mountain is a lot higher to climb than I realized. And so I'm at this midway point, and I've got a lot more switchbacking till I make it to the top, right? The next symbol is a snow globe, and a person that's shaken up inside. And I feel that way because, you know, in the past few months, I found myself much more unable to be not dogmatic, but to refer to any one singular structure that works the best for viewing the world. I've cycled through a lot of lenses lately, and it's left me feeling kind of shaken up in some ways. And I'm just trying to let the dust settle so I can recalibrate a little bit. So much of experience is challenging me right now to accept things that I see a pattern, and then I assume that pattern will always play out, and it doesn't. The next symbol is somebody looking both ways before crossing the street, because I am the number one candidate for taking my own advice. And I do a lot of thinking about, well, how do I do this right? How do I not waste my time? You know, when I spoke to some of the things that are useful in terms of creating action and getting past mental blocks, in large part, I'm speaking to myself as I'm speaking to an audience. And from my experience, you know, I'm dealing with that right now in a lot of different ways. The last symbol is is it's like a piece of wood that's balancing on a little circular object. And if this wasn't rapid fire, maybe I would break down the symbolic significance of that a little bit deeper, because I think it goes deeper than just the intention I had when I drew it. But 2021 for me is the year of balance. I love that the numbers add up to 5. 5 is the number of balance. It's halfway between 1 and 10. It's actually made up of a curve and a right angle. It's incredible the way the physical form of the number 5 is it represents balance. But it's the year of balance. It's instead of being 100% on the gas pedal and then 100% off the gas pedal and on the brake, I'm seeking to find a way of living that is sustainable over time, that is not so stop-go, that is more balanced in every sense of the word. So,
where's that number 5 coming from? Is it
the number 5? So 2021 in numerology, which is something that I like to play with because it's fun, right? I don't attribute the all of everything to any one thing, but the idea is that you add up dates to come up with a number that is representative of the essence of a given year, of a given birth date. I'm really not all that well versed, to be honest with you, but I added up the numbers to 2021. It came out to be 5. 2020 was the year of clarity. For me and a lot of people who had, nothing but time to sit with themselves and kind of learn to deal with themselves or go crazier. And 2021 is the year of balance. That's what
I love it. I had a question. What do you have a lucky number? Is that 5?
So 5 is a number that is very dear to me. For a number of different reasons. But if I was to have a lucky number, it would be the number 808. And funny enough, I think I collected a couple of the past symbol games that I had played in the past. And 808 is a number, I started seeing it everywhere. And this is before I was really willing to play with the idea of synchronicity. I was very, very skeptical and mistrusting. But I kept seeing this number 808 every single day, like multiple times a day. And I was like, oh my gosh, what is going on? So I looked it up and I found 2 things. It's either the worst omen in the world or it's the best omen in the world. And there's no in between. It's one or the other. So I continued to see it. And once I learned to kind of consult the universe a little bit more on why something like that might be happening, what I came to learn is that it's the number of infinite possibility. It's 2
2 infinite number and the yin and the yang in between.
Yes, it's 2 infinity symbols and the circle in between. Infinitely dark, infinitely light, infinitely chaotic, infinitely orderly. You can ascribe whatever you want to those 2 opposing infinites, but they both form this circle in the middle, which is life. And in a sense, life is infinitely beautiful. Life is infinitely atrocious and horrific. And we get the opportunity to decide which is which. We get that choice. And that's what I learned. It's like, well, dude, you read that it's the best omen in the world or the worst omen in the world. What are you going to do with that? I'm like, well, I certainly don't want to feel like I've got a bad omen being around, so I'm going to decide that it's the best omen in the world. And then it led to a whole depth of understanding of things that are too long for a rapid fire question session. So
next one. What is the sound of success to you?
The sound of success. I guess silence, maybe. Sometimes. So it depends. It's like I can answer that question a lot of ways, but silence is a sound of success because it's a state that I seek to reach very often. Quietness inside my mind and outside my mind. To be able to sit and contemplate silence and listen to silence without it getting too loud inside. It's extremely useful. And I think when you get there, there's this sensation of bliss and peace. And sometimes you can't sit down and just try to meditate your way to silence. I've found sometimes finding silence is a matter of confronting the things that I'm trying to turn the volume down on, but the volume doesn't stay down, or the volume never really went down. I just raised the volume of all the other thoughts. So finding true silence, it's success to me because it requires a balance of practicing mindfulness and taking care of the things that are necessary to be taken care of in order to access that space of silence. That
so
and
deep. Wow.
Yeah, Yeah.
Thank you for that. Wow, I'm enrolled, Michael. I am enrolled. We talked a lot about books, but perhaps do you have another inspirational book or podcast that you have listened to that you want to share with our viewers?
Not so much inspirational, but for the sake of, for anybody that's interested in trying to develop an objective view of history, and I don't mean it's a historical document. I mean our history, from a biological perspective, from a cultural perspective, from any perspective. Prometheus Rising, and I've only read the edition that's been edited by Israel Regardie, but it's by Robert Anton Wilson, and it's just I won't expand on it, but I highly recommend it. It's been the book of choice for me lately. The podcast is actually a lecture series, and it's by Jordan Peterson. It's the biblical lecture series, and it is not what it sounds like. Like, there's discussion of Mesopotamian myths, some of the first spoken myths that we know of. There's discussion of Egyptian mythology, Taoist philosophy. It's called the biblical lecture series because that's the focus of the interpretation of the metaphorical stories. But it has been, I've listened to, they're 2.5 hours a piece. It's endless content. It's been the most empowering thing that I've ever listened to personally. I've listened to it probably 3 times through, and there's 15 episodes. And every single time that I even start listening to it, it is such an organizing, empowering force for my life. If I had to recommend one, without prefacing as much as I just did and continuing to give in to the desire to preface it because of how it might sound, that is by far and away it. The biblical lecture series. It's on YouTube.
Wow, amazing. And we will put all that into the description of the recording that will be available on YouTube. It will be available on Google Podcast and Spotify as well. So we'll put all that for our viewers. And last question, but not least, Michael. Sorry.
The other recommendation is go with the flow. If this is your first time here, don't let it be your last.
I agree that with you 100%. Go with the flow is my number one choice. What role do you play as a human being on this planet, Michael? Laser.
Roles. I'm a partner. I'm an older brother. I'm a son. I'm a confidant. I'm a support. I'm a shoulder to lean on. I am a creative and spontaneous and insightful individual that can help other people have fun, that get other people thinking and interested in creating themselves. I play a lot of different roles, and I think that we all do if we're willing to recognize ourselves for the amount of and scope of effect that we have on the world. The qualities of the role that I seek to play for the world, I hope to help us integrate. Right? I hope to help us not develop hardline ethical structures that are built out of judgment, but I hope to help the world find integration between all of the various ways that we could possibly go about doing something, right? Creating harmony, creating frequencies, adding my frequency to the frequencies that play in the world in such a way that it doesn't cancel them out, but that it elevates them and exalts them. I seek to play a role that provides individuals space, to feel connected, to feel reflected, to feel understood. I seek to be somebody that inspires, and I seek to be somebody that plays many roles. I seek to play many roles as well. If I could do it all, I would. Focusing on one thing is almost one of my biggest challenges. But
yeah, and jack of all trades. And to me, you are the alchemist, Michael. So thank you for taking this time, for spending this hour, almost and a half together. It's been so inspirational to me. I love hearing you. I'd love to have you back. So many more questions, and I'm sure viewers also have been intrigued to know you, to hear more. And where can someone find you?
So you can really, my website is kind of the only place that you can find me at this time. I've got my social medias shut down for a variety of different reasons, but alcheme.oo. And you heard the last part right. It's alchemy.oo, or it's alchemy with an ellipsis afterwards because the continuation is endless. But You know, Flo, I just wanted to return the compliments. I absolutely, the number of times that we have gotten to talk, you have left me with tons of insight, an overwhelming sense of well-being. You're incredible to speak to. I thank you so much for the platform that you give to other people in the form of the Go with the Flow podcast. It's been an honor to speak with you. And whether it's on camera or off camera, I'd be happy to talk anytime. You know, if I had but one wish, it was that, you know, I maybe asked you a few more questions and you got to showcase some of the beauty of your mind and your soul. But thank you so much.
I'll
really
take the challenge, Michael. We'll turn the table. Let's turn the table and have a podcast for our viewers where you get to interview me.
That would be perfect. I would love to.
Yeah.
I would love to.
I'm accepting the challenge.
Yes. Perfect.
Awesome. Any closing words before we close the live stream here?
The illusion of separation is a useful illusion, and it can be a tool, and it's necessary for me to be me and you to be you. However, it is absolutely an illusion, and to the extent that you can see that it is an illusion, or seek to see how things are not truly separate, even if that concept is sort of bounces off and it's like, well, that doesn't make any sense. Just think about it for a little while. You know, the bee doesn't exist without the flower, and we say that they're separate organisms because that's the parameters that we draw around them. Those are the lines that we draw, you know, but from the perspective of a cell inside of our body, you know, the heart and the brain, those are different universes. So the idea that there is any such thing as separation, play with that and be playful with it. And yeah, that's what came to mind.
In yogic term, we say namaste, you know, the soul in me bow to the soul in you.
Yes. Yes.
Thank you, Michael. I get to acknowledge you for your wisdom, for your beautiful voice, for all the gold that you shared, you poured into everybody's heart today. Success is not final. Failure is not fatal. Did I get it right?
Failure is not fatal. That's right.
Not fatal. Beautiful. And I love, love, love the concept of Shampa. I can't wait to dig more into that and learn more about it. And, you know, everything that you shared, nature rewards courage, are another, you know, golden nugget that really stood out for me. So thank you for that. And for everybody, again, you can find Michael Muscatello on his website, alchemy.oo. This will be recorded, available on Spotify, Google Cast, and a couple of others. It will be posted YouTube channel as well. And guys, see you next time. And please, you know what? I'm challenging you, the viewers, to write and draw you 4 symbols and then share in your comments. Like, we want to hear from you. What are the 4 symbols that represent your life, and what do they mean to you? Yeah.
Yeah, my contact information, look, my personal contact info is there on the website. You know, reach out if you want help with the exercise. Am I doing this right? The answer is yes, but if you want somebody to tell you that, give me a call. Be happy to talk about it with you. Yeah. Please try it out. It's a lot of fun.
Awesome. Bye, guys. Thank you for being here. We'll see you next time.